In businesses, you need stories. You need stories to connect with people. You need story to share what have you gone through that give you a qualification to help others, right? If you don't have a story of being lucky, you wouldn't be able to share with people what luck mean to you. What's going on? What's going on, everybody?
Hey, hey, welcome, welcome.
Welcome to the Tides Newsletters. Today, we're going to talk about the topic of storytelling.
Storytelling. You can't avoid it. You can't escape it. We all tell stories, and now we're going to learn how and why you need to learn how to tell stories better.
Each of us has some of the great story in our lives where we can use it to do business with people, to connect with people, and to bond with people. So here's my question, Kiza. What's the greatest story that you want to share with me, man?
Oh, man. I could, the greatest story I've ever been told. That's a tough question, but I can tell you one, and I'll tell you why it's a great story. Anyone who's listened to Simon Sinek talk, he always likes to talk about why. Why do we even tell stories in the first place? So a really great story is why I was told this story back in the day, but it's a story that I think can convey the value of telling certain kinds of stories, because stories allow us to connect both with the people that we're engaging with and also with our own ideas. Because at the end of the day, storytelling is all about conveying ideas. It's all about expressing something, either to persuade, either to provoke, either to encourage, train, teach, transform. Stories have the power to do all those things and more. And I remember when I was first told the story of how I was born, it changed my entire perspective on how lucky I am as a person. So that's why I thought it was an amazing story. Imagine that you're standing in the waiting room outside the emergency ward where, babies are being born all day. You're expecting dad and you don't know if your son is ready to come out or not. The doctor rushes out the door and he says, Sir, we need you to make a decision. Follow me. Can you imagine being that dad or that person? You know, this day is already stressful. And now a doctor is calling you into a room that you've never been before and he's telling you to make a decision. And the doctor asked, All right, sir, to my father, he said, Sir, how do you want your child to be born? Are we going to do it natural or are we going to do it cesarean? Now, first off, this is a very uncommon practice. Normally it's up to the mother, but for some strange reason, this doctor wanted to reach out to my father and find out what his choice was. And my papa was like, let's go cesarean. And here's what happened. Imagine this. The chances are ridiculously small, but somehow, on a fluke of luck, call it serendipity, whatever the case was, when they started the cesarean, they discovered that my umbilical cord had been wrapped around my neck 3 times. If I had been born normal, like through the regular canal, without the cesarean style where they take you out of your mother's stomach, I would have literally been like the classic criminal on the gallows by the rope. And strangely enough, just because of that one choice, that one unexpected question, that moment of opening the opportunity to make a choice, I was able to come into the world fine and healthy. So when I was told that story growing up, it really made me realize just how lucky I am. And it showed me that there's a different perspective. So that's the power of storytelling in one small way. It can change your entire perspective on how you look at your own life in some ways. So that's a quick 5 second story. But what did you think about that impact of that story on as a
Man, you
listener?
never tell me that story, man. I've known you for 5 years.
Yeah, I got to keep it fresh, right?
I mean, storytelling is one of the great way for you to connect with people, like I said earlier, right? But also it's a great tool for you to build your brand. In businesses, you need stories. You need stories to connect with people. You need story to share what have you gone through that give you a qualification to help others, right? If you don't have a story of being lucky, you wouldn't be able to share with people what luck mean to you.
Yeah, in fact, bringing you back to the example that you mentioned, how businesses also use stories. Kind of going into that direction, we all know companies like Nike. We all know companies like Apple. And for many of us, we know these companies because of the stories that go along with them. Like, for example, a perfect one is Coca-Cola. The story that this company is trying to tell you every single time you see an ad, every time you see a bottle, every time you see a truck go by on the street is the story of opening happiness.
Yes, sir.
And interestingly enough, we connect with that. Who doesn't want to open happiness? Who doesn't want to hear that crisp sound and enjoy that flavor? Because you've been conditioned to the story that the company has presented. The same goes for Apple, you know, design that is pleasing to the eye and easy to use. Something like Nike, just do it. The story of not holding back, the story of giving it your all, framed in that short word or phrase, I should say, just do it. The tick, the swoosh, as they even call it. So, whether we know it or not, we're surrounded by different stories. And oftentimes, the best stories are the ones that have been so well told that they just become a part of our understanding of what a thing is, like Nike, like Apple, like Coca Cola. But what do you think about that, Rick?
Yeah, but I know that one of my experience talking to one of the Nike former employees that whenever that they come to Nike as a new employee, when they get on board, the first thing that they get to present from the executive is the story of the founders, right? That's where I think you get the mindset put in where you get to work with the company like that. And when you understand the story behind the brand, that allows you to put your heart and soul when working with a company like that. And I think that's really powerful when companies can craft a compelling story, a true story from the founders and from what I've been working that built the brands to the new employees, onboarding them, makes them understand why they are there, why they put in the effort and work for that company.
You bring up a great point, connecting individuals with the story, resonating them with what the company's about. Like with Nike, I believe the founder's name was Phil Knight. Um, he went to school at Oregon State back in the day. And it's crazy how he came about the process of creating Nike, the whole idea of being an athlete and trying to get a shoe that was better suited for the people who are actually wearing them. But you're right. It really drives home the point of connecting with a brand or even getting an employee to connect with a company's mission. But here's a question I have. How can people develop that ability to tell a story?
Learning how to craft a compelling story is important. And from what I know, is the story that you want to tell is it has the beginning, the middle, and the end. You start with the background of where you were at. From the background, you building the challenges that you overcome and the solution that you came up with, that you overcome that challenge, and then the resolution in the end. That's one framework that you can use for the story. So the first thing is you need to learn how to tell a story of yourself, a short story. You only need to tell a story that represent one point that you want to make to the audience. And here's an example. Let's say Apple, they have many stories to tell. Specifically for the iPhone, the story is about design. The story is about how Steve Jobs have a purpose of making great product, visual appealing to people, and put it into the design of the product, which is the iPhone. But then there are many other frameworks that one can build upon or be creative when telling a story for themselves.
I guess the real way to develop that is to be able to tell a story about yourself, not an entire chronology, but just a story with a purpose. And in fact, I think you do that very, very well, Ricky, because your ability to tell stories briefly in the beginning of your presentations connect with the audience, to really engage with the people who you're talking to is something that is a skill that is not always well understood because people often are shy about telling their personal story because they don't know what information to include or to leave out. So I wonder, when you say tell the story about what's important to the audience, how do you decide what's important to them?
You pick one story that you overcome and come up with the solution and resolution. And whatever the presentation that you're presenting have a point. If that story resonate with you and the presentation, you can put it in for the first 5 minutes. The reason is that you want to bond with the audience. You want to tell the audience that you are one of them, right? You don't want to coming in and present yourself as an expert in something because you detach yourself from the audience. So telling a story, break down that barriers, the walls between you and the audience, so that you can start telling them how have you overcome that, the strategy, the method, and the content within your presentation. I always tell a story of how I came up from a high school student, study abroad, didn't speak English when I came to the US, and how I use soccer as a way for me to make friends with people, how I learned about hard work and development, personal development, and then how I use that as a lessons for me to continue to learn more things in business, in life, in many other areas. And then from there, I can use an approach into specific topics that I want to communicate with the audience.
Using your story as a way to then segue into the topics you want to talk to your audience about. That really allows somebody to understand what information is important, because if it's not relevant for the transition, then it's probably not relevant for the story. Like, for example, everything that you described, coming to the US, learning English, soccer, and then gradually moving through that process to getting a master's and forward, and after that, it all relates to what you're helping them understand, that they can do it too, that you're connected with them in the sense that you didn't come here with all the answers. You develop the skills, and so can they. In fact, somebody who does a really great job of telling their personal story, you just reminded me of, is the author James Clear. For those, if you've ever read the book Atomic Habits, the first chapter about how he overcame, the challenge of what happened to him with a significant sporting accident, how he had to basically relearn the basics, really allows you to connect and understand why the whole book is written the way it is. So that point of using your knowledge of what you're trying to say to determine what information is relevant to your story should definitely help anyone who's unsure about how to present their own story or how to transition to their topic.
I've never read the book, The Atomic Habits, but because you're telling that story to me so many times that I felt like I already know the book already. And if any of you haven't read the James Clear book, make sure that you click in the link below. I want to put it in for you guys. And hopefully you can tell me more about what you think about the book. And I think it's a great book because you have been sharing so much information already. I kind of like practicing through what you've shared because of that stories. That's how the power of the story are to people.
The power of the story, in fact, the ability to repeat a story as well, kind of reinforces the idea behind it. Because interestingly enough, somebody like, well, this is a person that we both know really well. Anyone who's new to the entrepreneurial space might not have heard of him, but his name is Alex Mosey. And if you ever watched any of his interviews, you'll notice, assuming that they're long interviews, he always tells a story. And he keeps it simple and he keeps it brief, but it's always got a big impact on the audience. You can always see how people respond after they hear how much he had to go through before he made his first million, before he grew his business to its significant size that it is today. And interestingly enough, even when he tells a story, there was one time I saw him on stage on a video, and he almost started to get a little choked up, pretty emotional about his story. And strangely enough, that alone, I think, went so beyond just the content he was trying to share. The audience really felt the genuine character of this guy. And that really allowed them to connect with him throughout the entire presentation. The idea of storytelling is one thing that you can never overlook. Whether we like it or not, we all are in a way storytellers. Because in order to convey any kind of idea, in order to get anyone's buy-in on anything, there's a sense of a story. Even something as small as buying something from a local store, there's a story around that. Why are you going to that store? What's the story behind it? The story might just be something as simple as it's the most convenient place that has good prices. It's a short story. I go there for this reason. Because often the story is the reason. The story that you're telling is the reason behind the value that you're providing. And that is what allows you to connect with people and get them to understand where you're coming from and hopefully come on the journey with you.
That's some good ending. What's your story? Tell us in the comments below.
Please do. And check out James Clear's book if you haven't read it already, Atomic Habits. Definitely a top pick.